First question would be, the mandatory first question of answer 10 questions.
Sure.
Is how did you become a musician? And what's your story as an artist? And when I say artist, it doesn't necessarily have to be just music. It could be anything
Sure.
else. But tell me a little bit about your family history in arts.
Sure,
and how you got into playing the trumpet.
Sure. Well, I didn't have a choice, actually.
Okay.
So my parents are both music educators. And my mom tells the story like when a baby is born, the mother takes the baby and counts the toes and fingers. And she said she looked at my embouchure to see if it looked like it was good to play trumpet. And so a lot of kind of interesting things to think about. And she grew up playing trombone, but she heard those trumpet lines and thought, he really needs to play trumpet. So I didn't have much of a choice. So getting into the gender thing just a little bit, when I grew up, I was in a small town, and there were 3 trumpet players that I knew
Here in
of.
Alabama?
No, this was in Minnesota, a small town in south central Minnesota. There were 3 trumpet players. There was my mom, and there were 2 other women.
Okay.
And I, like any little boy, wasn't sure I wanted to play a girl's instrument. So, but...
Little did you know.
Little did I know, yeah. But years later, beginning band and so on, and pretty soon a trumpet showed up, and sure enough, I had a kind of a natural affinity to it, and, notes came out and they sounded okay, so we started from there, and I played duets with my mom, and I got my first CD player in like 1987, that high-tech, thing there, and I remember like one of the CDs that was included was a New York Philharmonic with Zubin Mehta conducting, Pictures at an Exhibition, and La Valse. And I just remember hearing that sound and wanting to sound like Phil Smith from a very young age. I don't know if I knew who Phil Smith was at that moment, but knew I wanted to sound like that.
So you were all for the New York sound.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, absolutely love it. And of course, over the years, I had parents that would encourage me. I played in the Kansas City Youth Symphony. I ended up taking lessons with one of the members of the Kansas City Symphony, starting I think in 6th grade. So had some great mentoring along the way. Pretty much kind of always knew that I wanted to be a trumpet player. But I also, my parents were both teachers. While I was studying with Phil Clark at the Kansas City Symphony, he finished his doctorate at the University of Georgia. I actually went down and heard one of his recitals, and I gained just a huge respect for teaching at the same time, and seeing what these teachers could bring to students' lives. So the idea of being both a performer and a teacher was always kind of central to what I wanted to do.
So you never had any second thoughts, any ideas of a different career ever? Maybe a question I like to ask is is there anything else in your life that you'd be just as good at as you're good at making music? And whether that would be a life for you is of course.
Sure. Well, I think I don't think we're necessarily here on Earth to just do one thing necessarily. I found a great deal of joy actually working at UPS. I was a supervisor there for a couple of years. I sold advertising for the Instrumentalist magazine, which was very satisfying and challenging in some ways. And but I always kept coming back. Now, music is a tough road, and I do remember taking a little time and talking to the advisors at the law school at University of Missouri, Kansas City, because I was going, wow, this trumpet thing is not easy. And I remember being in Chicago and calling one of the music stores and saying, all right, I'm almost done with this degree. Can I come back and have my job back at the music store? And they were like, give us a call if you still feel the same way in 6 months. And I just kind of kept going. Again, it's a demanding road, but and had a teacher early on, and I had talked to him about like interests in law and so on. He said, Mike, I know you well enough that I think if you don't, just put 100% into music, I think you'll always wonder what you could have done. Mm. So, no, I feel even to this day, I mean, the challenges and the and the benefits from music are immense. I don't feel like I'm running out of challenges by any means. So, and about the time I do, I end up sitting next to Chris Coletti, and then I realize I got a lot more practice to do. So, yeah.
What's your personal HSO history? Would be the next question. When did you join the symphony? Mm-hmm. And if you remember, still, what was your first show that you ever played with HSO?
First thing I ever played was with Tavo, and it was Mahler 2.
Okay, that's a nice.
Yeah, it's a nice introduction, right. I was a sub at that time, mm-hmm. and I was teaching there at Middle Tennessee State University, and a number of my colleagues had come down and played. I'm not exactly sure what the first connection was, but I remember getting a call from Hunter and saying, "I want to come down and play Mahler 2,"
and that was when? If
that was probably 2005, 2006. It's possible that may have been his final conducting performances. I don't remember for sure, but yeah. And then I really started playing, I want to say, and my involvement in the orchestra sort of kind of ramped up over time. And every time there was an opening, I always loved coming down to play. So I want to say by about 2008, I was doing a fair bit. And then I believe I didn't have an official audition, but I did have a lot of moments where I had to, sit in the hot seat. Yeah. And I believe my appointment was... when did you start? Was it like 2008? 11, yeah. Okay. Somewhere around then. And so yeah, I've gotten to play with quite a few different people, and I think Chris, came in as he won the second trumpet position, and then our principal left, and he was elevated to principal, and then I kind of ended up kind of in a sort of a temporary permanent position in the second spot there, and it's been a delightful marriage ever since. So
just everybody knows whom we're talking about. We're talking about Chris Coletti, our principal trumpet mm-hmm. player, who also played for the Canadian Brass for I think 10 years,
right?
10 years or so.
He said
he likes to play in an orchestra, which is good for us, right?
He does. I absolutely love it. Yeah. So yeah, I remember him saying that he retired from the Canadian Brass at the ripe old age of 35. So, but yeah, that's. I think one of the things, and this is probably off script a little bit, but I think one of the most delightful things about the Huntsville Symphony is this sort of almost a festival orchestra atmosphere where people come in from all over the country, and of course we've got some wonderful people local as well, but I think that's just one of the real special things about it, and being able to collaborate with people from Boston and New York and elsewhere here in Alabama and Louisiana.
And we just hired a tuba player from Chicago.
So. Right. Yep. Looking forward to meeting him.
So, what are you doing in the music world when you're not here with the HSO? You
Sure.
teach.
Yes,
right?
I do. I teach at Middle Tennessee State University. I've normally got a studio that ranges from 16 to 22 wow, students. Okay. So that keeps me very busy. I also have a family. I have 5 boys ranging from 19 down to 9.
That cries for a brass quintet.
It does cry for a brass quintet, but most of them play piano. Okay. But my 12-year-old is starting to play the trumpet. Cool. Of course, he's got braces, so you're dealing with that, but he's doing okay. So, And then I'll sub in the Nashville Symphony on occasion. I had a rehearsal with them yesterday. I have a concert with them this coming Sunday. So there's always many things. I love I love teaching at a university and the diversity that comes with the job. And starting work on a new trumpet concerto with another composer for myself and wind ensemble next year. So there's all sorts of things to keep us engaged, for sure.
The probably most general question, but feel free to just talk whatever you want to talk about. Those are the best interviews anyway. There's a question and then you just say whatever you want to say.
Might get yourself in trouble with trumpet players, musicians in general.
So the question is just about how you see the future of classical music. Whether there's a future for classical music, and based on your experience, based on your life experience and professional history, and whatever you teach your students about this, and to tell them, oh, this is going to be around for the next 800 years anyway, so don't worry.
You know, that's a tough question. And depending on the week and what's going on, a few years ago, I think, all of us wondered what the next 20 years would look like, as we're, making our way through COVID and so on. It's sort of a small percentage of the population that sort of like, comes to concerts and helps fund it and so on. But the outreach of classical music is huge. I mean, we wouldn't have, something as simple as like, film scores and so on without, a huge history of classical music. So, and this might get a little dark in some ways, but I tell my students at the university, as long as they have marching bands, they need to have trumpets. So, I feel like my job at the university is pretty secure. But I've had some really wonderful students, and I've got students playing in military bands. One that's very active in the recording studios in Nashville, and he plays with the Nashville Symphony all the time. I've got another former student who's now at Yale. I think looking at these young people and the creativity that is blossoming among them, I think we've got a very bright future. I think there will always be a challenge of finding those patrons and so on that we need to help, like logistically make it happen. But certainly, I was at Arizona State when in 2001, 9/11, 2001, and shortly after there was an interview in the Hugh Downs. School of Journalism, I think, and Hugh Downs interviewed Doc Severinsen. So what an opportunity to see these legends in their fields. But Doc Severinsen was actually very. He said music is the medicine that heals the soul. So there will always be a huge need for music, for music in all genres. And as long as there's creativity, as long as there are people that love, creativity and the creativity of the past, I think we've got a future. So, but I think there's a lot of people that don't know just how exciting classical music can be. I'm sitting here, coming down here, listening to some wind ensemble music, and I'm wondering, do our students in the music appreciation classes, do they hear this? Do they hear the music of Shostakovich? Do they hear those incredible, awe-inspiring, those breathtaking moments in Mahler? How can they not, be moved by such a things? But I think we need to make sure that people are being exposed to music, and there's a lot of different ways. And talking to one of my students today, and their comment was that there needs to be more music appreciation, more appreciation of jazz in like the School of Music, and I said, well, we need that in the state of Tennessee, and the state of Tennessee has a huge, tradition of like the marching band on the field, and they're all doing these competitions. Like, why can't we have a Miles Davis, a show that's built around the music of Miles Davis? So there's a lot of ways to reach out, and you hope that that hearing that marching show might intrigue someone to go
and jazz is now older than it's 100, what we would say probably 120.
Yeah.
Around 120, 130.
Yeah.
If we go all the way back to the roots.
Yeah.
And anything else, any hobby you have time in your life for that is not connected to music?
So let me see. Last weekend I was out camping with about 50 boys.
Okay.
And so having boys, there's going to be scouting activities and so on. So a lot of my the time outside of teaching and playing, it's all with the family. And there's canoeing, there's camping, you name it.
And you can just wake up at 4 in your tent somewhere in the hills and practice the trumpet.
So Sunday morning,
okay,
I got up early. I went and got in the car, pulled out my trumpet, and started working on some things that I needed to for the week here.
See, I'm not making this up.
No.
These things happen.
Yes. And pretty soon I've got about 10 boys standing around the car.
Okay.
I'm like, can you play Harry Potter? Sure. Yeah, I can play some. How about Star Wars? Yeah, I can. Jurassic Park. So I played a little concert right there in the middle of the forest. So yeah.
Thank you for the interview. I
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.